Hi, I am Barbara. I'm a volunteer here at Chino Hill State Park, and I am up on the top of Gilman Peak right now. I'm up here with park interpreter Ian and park interpretive specialist Michaela. We attempted to do this program live a while ago, but we had a lot of technical issues, I'm told. So we're going to do it this way instead, and you won't be able to interact with us live, but please later on when you view the program, I know there were 40 or so of you that were watching, comment, put something in the comment section or whatever to let us know who you were. And if you have any questions, please submit your questions and we'll answer them all. So I'm not sure how many of you have been up here before. We started our hike this morning from way down in Yorba Linda, way down the hill there. We started actually at about 9:15, and there is a great place to park down there called the Quarter Horse parking area. And one thing that's really nice about it is that it has a restroom, so you can hit the restroom before you hit the trail. We took the Quarter Horse Trail to Southridge Trail, then we got onto Easy Street Trail, Telegraph Canyon Trail, and eventually we started to come up the Gilman Peak Trail. A Gilman Peak Trail is a pretty steep trail, but if you just persevere, you can huff and puff your way up here without a whole lot of difficulty. We figure our round trip hike today will be probably 5.5 or 6 miles. On the way up, by the way, on the trail, we saw several deer prints and a scat that was as big as a foot, so we were pretty sure it was mountain lion scat. When we got up here to the top, we saw more deer prints, and we also saw a beautiful turkey vulture fly over, and he was tagged. We saw the tag under his wing. So to give you a little perspective, for those of you who aren't from this area, we're located in Brea, California right now, and we're about 5 or 6 miles east of the 57 freeway, a straight shot down the freeway from Anaheim Stadium where the Angels play their baseball games. Ian's trying to show you there, off in the distance. I'm not sure whether you can see it, but down there you can actually see Anaheim Stadium down there. So Gilman Peak is actually the second highest peak in Chino Hill State Park. It's 1,685 feet of elevation. The highest peak is San Juan Hill, and it's about 100 feet taller. But the reason we chose Gilman Peak was because Gilman Peak has a really interesting history. So first of all, there's some gorgeous views from up here. If you look behind me, you would be looking basically north to the San Gabriel Mountains, and we just had a recent storm that came through here, so they're covered with snow right now. You'll see Mount Baldy or Mount San Antonio up there, and if you go off to the east, you can sometimes see the Mount Baldy, the Big Bear area out there. But also, if you are really lucky, you can see all the way to San Jacinto, which is out in Palm Springs. That's the mountain where they have the Palm Springs aerial tramway, which if you've never been on, you got to do that. If you look to the south, you will go all the way on a clear day, 26 miles across the sea, and you'll get to Catalina Island, and you can see that. I can see the top of it here above the layer of clouds today. So fantastic views from out here. So Gilman Peak was named after a gentleman named Herbert S. Gilman. Herbert Gilman, he liked to be called HS. He came here in 1908 from Minnesota, and he developed an orange grove, about a 10-acre orange grove in the city of San Demise. He was very interested in the problems of irrigation, or how to water his orange grove. And because of that, he went on to become manager of 2 different water districts. And Also, he was a very, very important conservationist for California. Conservationist being somebody who works to protect and preserve the environment, especially our plants and our animals. So he was very deserving of having a peak named after him. So I want to show you, first of all, what's up on Gilman Peak today, and then we'll talk about what used to be here. So today, I'm going to walk back here, and you can see that there is a big chunk of cement back here. It has a survey marker on the top. The survey marker says Division of Highways 1972, and we think that that is left over from when they were doing a survey to possibly put in a road that went through the park, through what is now the park, back before it became a park. They were thinking about putting a road through here. So that's left over from that, and it was probably buried in the ground at some point. So then over here, we have a lovely pile of rocks, a beat up wooden sign that says Gilman PE on the back and Gilman Peak on the front. And, oh, and there's money in here. If you look at this, somebody put quarters and nickels and dimes up in this. I'm going to look around because there could be some more money in here. But we'll put this money in a little slush fund for buying a new marker for the peak. So this rickety old sign is here, and then the rocks, whose purpose it is to hold the sign up. By the way, be careful of piles of rocks like this if you're hiking. Snakes love them. Rattlesnakes love little hideouts like this. So that's all that's up here on Gilman Peak today. We haven't even seen a hiker or a biker, which sometimes you would, but not today. But the things would have been very, very different if you had come up here between 1935 and 1966. There would have been a structure up here. It would have been 30 feet tall. It would have had a ladder, steel ladder leading up to it, and it would have had a little room up at the top. And that structure was an operating fire lookout tower. Michaela has a picture of it. There it is, the Gilman Peak Fire Lookout Tower. One of 600 towers that were in use in California at that time to help spot wildfires and assist the firefighters in their efforts to put those fires out. So the thought was, this was back in 1930, that the Forest Department wanted to put a tower on all the tallest peaks in California. Obviously, that was going to require a tremendous amount of manpower, a tremendous amount of labor, tremendous amount of workers, but it was really not a problem because it was the Great Depression in those days. The U.S. economy was very, very bad. Many people were out of work. Everybody was poor. So everybody was looking for a job. And our president at the time was Franklin Roosevelt, and he came up with a plan. He developed a workforce called the Civilian Conservation Corps. They called it the CCCs for short. Michaela has a picture of some CCC workers. And basically he put these people to work mainly in our national parks and forested areas. They did things like build fire breaks, lay phone lines, build visitor centers, interpretive centers, campgrounds, campsites, whatever. And one of the big things that they did was to build these fire lookout towers. So we know that the CCCs alone built 250 of these lookout towers in California. And it was great for them because not only did they were they back to work, earning a living, but they felt like they were doing something very important for the environment. So in just 6 weeks' time, the Gilman Peak Fire Lookout Tower was constructed. And the phone line, that one phone line that went down to Yorba Linda to the forestry station or fire station, was laid. If you are hiking up the Gilman Peak Trail today, stop from huffing and puffing, take a rest for a second, and if you can see over the mustard, it's a little hard right now because we have a lot of mustard, but you can actually see a line of telephone poles coming up the hillside there that are left over from that fire line. So once the tower was complete, it was time for a big dedication ceremony. This dedication ceremony was to take place September 21st, 1935. And it was a big deal. It had been advertised in all the local newspapers. Everybody was invited to come if they wanted to. And they were given directions on how to get up here from a little town called Olinda that used to exist right a couple miles to the west of here, right near where the present-day Carbon Canyon Regional Park is and the Olinda Oil Museum, because the town of Olinda was a community of oil workers and their families, basically. So these people were told, come drive up to Gilman Peak if you want to come to the ceremonies. And we think they would have been driving up what is now the park's Northridge Trail. So it's a steep climb up here. And remember, they're not coming up in modern day vehicles. They don't have these SUVs and pickup trucks and that sort of thing. Michaela, show them what they would have come up here in. They would have come up here in vehicles like Ford Roadsters or Lincoln Zephyrs, or because it was the 1930s, lots of people didn't even have cars. They might have been coming up in a horse and buggy. But whatever the case, they made it up here, and there were a lot of dignitaries here. We have a picture showing some of the dignitaries that were up here that day. The Master of Ceremonies was John Osterman. He was president of the Orange County Forest Protective Association. Ranger Joe Sherman, who was the first Orange County, California State Ranger, the first state ranger in California. And he was the one who would have been down there at that fire station down below in Yorba Linda. So he was here. Remember those CCCs that built the tower? They were all here, and they came from a place called Camp Tuna in Los Angeles. So they were here with their supervisor. There was a 50-year resident of Carbon Canyon that was here, and he talked about all the different fires that had taken place during his lifetime in Carbon Canyon and how there was no way to fight those fires. So anyway, the tower was dedicated to Mr. Gilman, of course, and Mr. Gilman had the honors of raising the flag, as each of the towers had a flag that flew from the top. And while he raised that flag, a lucky little boy named Lee Porter, 12-year-old boy from Placentia, had the honors of playing the bugle. So we have a picture. You can see Lee Porter playing the bugle while Mr. Gilman is raising the flag there in the picture. So try to imagine this tower standing here. It's 30 feet tall. It cost $2,400 to build, and then an extra $1,200 for the cost of the phone line down to the fire station. So the tower is made of steel. It actually has all the latest equipment, all the modern construction. So it has a steel ladder that goes up to the little room at the top. It was a 14 by 14 foot room, which is a pretty standard size. It was called a cab, the room at the top. And so when I stand here, I can just picture this tower being here. I can really imagine it. But what this tower did not have was electricity. No electricity. They had to use lanterns or flashlights. It had no water, not even drinking water. So if they wanted drinking water, it had to be brought up occasionally with some groceries by the forest department trucks. And it had no plumbing. So instead of a bathroom, they had to come down the stairs and use the outhouse. So living up here would have been very primitive, to say the least. It would have been very peaceful. It would have been very quiet for sure. Maybe all the sounds they heard were sounds of the animals that were around here at the time and still are today. So the public was actually really fascinated with people who lived in these fire lookout towers. They thought it was just a fascinating life, and they wanted to know more about it. So there were lots of newspaper articles that featured some of the fire lookouts. Because of that, I was able to find out who some of the fire lookouts were for this tower that's standing here today. We know the first one was somebody named Buell Castile, and he was only here, we think, just that first season. The next one we have a picture of was Harvey George French, and Harvey George French had just recently graduated from Fullerton High School when he got this job. Most of these jobs were seasonal jobs. Almost all of them were seasonal jobs. They worked during the fire seasons. So Harvey George French eventually got called away. He joined the Marines, called away, went to World War II. But when he came back, Harvey George French actually pursued a career with the fire department and ended up retiring after 34 years with them. There was a gentleman named Glenn Downer who was a fire lookout here. He did it with his wife, so the two of them lived up there in the cab. I think we have a picture of him too, don't we, Michaela? Glenn Downer. He said he only got 2 days off a month, but he thought it was the best job in the world, pretty much the best job in the world. He loved this job. Okay, so Michaela will show you a picture of Glenn Downer here. There was a gentleman named William Wolfe that we don't know much about. And then there was a grandmotherly type. Her name was Lois Smith, and she actually had first become a fire lookout when all the men were being called off to fight in World War II, and women then were needed to replace them in the workforce. So they were doing now what were traditionally male jobs, and that's when she became a firefighter a fire lookout for the first time in another tower somewhere. And then she came to the Gilman Peak Tower after that. One of the things that she really loved was seeing all the wildlife. And I know that she probably saw deer and bobcats and mountain lions and coyotes. She saw birds and raptors and squirrels, rabbits, rattlesnakes, you name it. We see a lot of those same things obviously here today, but I'm sure back then they were really here in abundance. And then the last couple that we know about that were in the tower had kind of a tragedy. Their names were David and Myrtle McKenzie, and they were husband and wife. Remember I told you there was that one phone line, their only line of communication to the Yorba Linda fire station, and they were supposed to check in once a day on that line to let them know what the status of things was, and also, if everything was okay. But on this one particular day, they didn't check in. So somebody was sent up from the fire station to check on them. And when they got up here, sadly, they discovered that all the windows and doors were closed on the cab, and there was some sort of a gas appliance running. Probably, I'm imagining something like a propane stovetop or something of that sort, or a propane heater. So what had happened was David had died of carbon monoxide poisoning, Myrtle actually ended up living. So that was a tragedy. So one of the pieces of equipment that was standard in fire lookouts and still is today in the ones that are still operating was called the Osborne Firefinder. If any of you have ever been to Disneyland's California Adventure, and I'm sure most of you have, there is or was a little area there called the Redwood Play Area or something of that sort. And if you went in there, you could actually climb to the top of a replica of a fire lookout tower. And if you got up there in that room, you would have seen an Osborne Firefinder. You probably didn't know what it was at the time. Michaela will show you a picture. In the top left there, you can see it's round, and it helped the fire lookouts pinpoint the exact location of a fire, and they would pass that information on to the firefighters. And so that was and is still a standard piece of equipment in fire lookout towers, the Osborne Firefinder. So obviously life was pretty quiet, pretty lonely at times up here in the Gilman Peak Lookout. So they really welcomed any visitors the few visitors they had, even when the forest truck brought up their drinking water or the groceries or whatever. It was nice to have visitors. We know that on one certain day, April 21st, 1955, there was a group of Boy Scouts who came up here. They were from that town of Olinda and also Chino, and they came up here to visit the fire lookout tower. They went up to the top to the cab. They got a tour of the cab. The lookout told them about the duties of a fire lookout. They had lunch up here. They took a nice hike. It must have been a really special day for that group of scouts, and also fun for the fire lookouts to have company that day. And I'm wondering whether any of our viewers might have actually been around for that. I mean, you'd probably be about 75 today, but maybe there are some people who actually were with that group of scouts that came up here. That would be neat to find out. So the question is, obviously the lookout tower isn't here anymore. There is nothing up here except what I showed you. So why? What happened to it? We know we still have plenty of wildfires. So why is there no lookout tower anymore? Well, there were three main things that led to the demise of the lookout towers. One of them was technology, because now they were using things like airplanes and helicopters to spot the fires and help fight the fires. There were also more sets of eyes because there were more people that were in the forested areas, and so they could spot them easier. Budget cuts, state budget cuts. The state of California now couldn't afford to keep 600 lookout towers in operation. It just got too expensive. And then the Forest Department started instituting something called the Let Burn policy, where they determined that it was in essence beneficial sometimes to the environment to let fires, or at least let parts of fires, burn themselves out. And that's still done sometimes today for various reasons. You've heard of controlled burns. So whatever the case, sadly in 1967, the Gilman Peak Lookout Tower was closed. Along with another one, there were actually 3 lookout towers in this large area. One was in Modjeska Canyon on Bolero Peak. That one also was closed at the same time that Gilman Peak Tower was. And then there was a third one on Santiago Peak in the Cleveland National Forest, which actually stayed open. So, as fate would have it, just a few months after the Gilman Peak lookout was closed, what do you suppose happened? Right, a fire. A big, disastrous fire. It was called the Paseo Grande fire. It started in Corona. I think Michaela has a picture of it. Started in Corona, and it was fueled by 35-mile-an-hour winds. So it burned all the way to the area of the Green River Golf Course. My guess is that maybe it got stopped by the Santa Ana River, which is would have had water in it. So it burned 48,000 acres. It left 46 families homeless, and obviously was very costly. And they determined afterwards that had either of the stations, either the Gilman Peak Fire Tower or the Bolero Peak Tower in Modjeska Canyon, been operable still, they would have been able to spot that fire a lot sooner than what it was spotted. So, beginning in 1967, what was left up here was an abandoned lookout tower. It got more and more decrepit every day. It probably got vandalized. At some point, somebody came and sawed off the ladder so that you wouldn't be able to climb up there. We're not sure exactly when the tower disappeared completely. We do know that the tower was up here as late as 1982 because Michaela has a picture. Here's a picture of the tower standing still in 1982. The park became a park in 1984, so we think probably the tower was completely down by that time. I've been hiking in here for 35 years, since right around 1984, and I wasn't lucky enough to ever see that tower. But I know there's probably a lot of you who did see that tower. So if you did, send us a comment. Let us know. I remember the tower being there, or whatever. You're very lucky if you were one of the ones who saw it when it was still standing. There are still fire towers standing elsewhere. I know there's one that's not too far from here I think it's up in the Big Bear area, called the Strawberry Peak. In fact, one of our other volunteers up there as a fire lookout. So there are scattered ones that are open. And then a lot of the other ones that closed weren't torn down, but they were converted, and they're being used as things like museums, interpretive centers, wildlife lookouts, various things like that. Some of them are even being used as vacation rentals, if you can imagine that. So, but whatever the case, we wish that our Gilman Peak Fire Lookout were still here, but sadly it is not. And all we can do is come up here and just kind of visualize what it looked like when it was here. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope that you've enjoyed learning a little bit of history about Gilman Peak. I think it's a pretty fascinating topic myself. And if you have any questions or comments, put them on the Facebook page, and we'll answer as many as we can. Again, we apologize for the trouble we had when we tried to do the presentation live. We did the next best thing, and we hope that this will be okay for you. Thank you to all of you who tried to join in live, and all of you who are watching it after the fact. So signing off here from atop Gilman Peak in Chino Hill State Park, Brea, California. Bye.